the middle of World War II, while Germany was bombing Great Britain, Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill addressed the people of Great Britain, and he spoke to them on the radio about the German invasion of Russia. And this is what he had to say. The aggressor, and by this he meant the German military, retaliates by the most frightful cruelties. As his armies advance, whole districts are being exterminated. Scores of thousands, literally, scores of thousands of executions in cold blood are being perpetrated by the German police troops upon the Russian patriots who defend their native soil. Since the Mongol invasion of Europe in the 16th century, there has never been methodical, merciless butchery on such a scale or approaching such a scale. And this is but the beginning. Famine and pestilence have yet to follow in the bloody ruts of Hitler's tanks. We are in the presence of a crime without a name. It took many, many years until a name could be found, and the name is the Holocaust, and I'm here to speak about it today. But before we speak about the Holocaust, there are a few questions which we have to answer. The first question is, of course, what was the Holocaust? The Holocaust was the Nazi government's senseless destruction of selected people and their culture. The Nazis didn't just randomly shoot people or eliminate people. No, they looted churches, they looted museums, then they set these places on fire, and used these paintings then for their own purpose, for their own exhibits. The next question is, of course, what do the words Holocaust and Shoah mean? Holocaust comes from the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and it consists of two words, holos, which means whole, and kaustos means to burn. It means whole burnt offering. The word Shoah is Hebrew, and it simply means calamity. So both words can be used completely interchangeably. If you don't know, if you want to save a few syllables, instead of saying Holocaust, you can just say Shoah, and it's exactly the same thing. There's a third word, which you may have never even heard of. It's the word that the gypsies are using, porimos. It means devouring or to eat up greedily by the devil. The next question is, did the Holocaust exist? Because if the Holocaust did not exist, I might as well be talking to you about the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy. In the town of Bad Arolsen in Germany, there's a huge warehouse that has 16 miles of shelving. And on these 16 miles of shelving, there are 50 million documents that prove the persecution of 17 million people. These documents have not been saved by some American organization or by some Jewish organization. No. These documents have actually been saved by the Nazi government. Because if you were a commander of a town in Eastern Europe and you were told to kill everybody, you couldn't just write back to Berlin and say, hey boss, I've done it. They wanted to see proof. So what you have is you have birth certificates, you have baptismal documents, you have school certificates, you have all different types of documents, passports. In addition to this, we have mass graves of victims, we have what's left of labor and concentration camps, we have US military documentation. Every time a camp was liberated by American forces documented in great detail what they found. They interviewed people, they took photographs, they saved artifacts. And we have photographs taken by murderers. Many of the pictures which I'm going to show you today are photographs taken by murderers. And we also have trials of murderers. Yet despite all of these actual tangible proofs, we have a group of people who insist the exist or they deny it in one form or another. Who are these Holocaust deniers? There are people who believe that this is a proper way to treat black people, this is the proper way to treat gay people, and this is the proper way to treat Jewish women and children. Holocaust deniers believe that their imagined supremacy as some master race justifies the murder of everybody else. Here are just some of the arguments used by Holocaust deniers. They say, for instance, the Holocaust didn't exist. The actual number of victims was smaller. It wasn't really 10 or 12 million. It was maybe just 1 or 2. The gas chambers were strictly for the clothing. The killing was not government approved. And because it wasn't government approved, therefore the killing didn't exist. Jews claim Holocaust to make money. I don't know one single Jew who made money out of the Holocaust. And then they say most people died from typhus. And then the final argument, which they tend to bring up all the time, again and again, is listen to the other side. If you had an argument with somebody, and you said 2 and 2 is 4, and somebody said, no, 2 and 2 is 5, and you said 2 and 2 is 4, and the other person said to you, well, listen to the other side, what would you say? There is no other side. Never, ever debate a Holocaust denier. Because what you're doing is you're giving them a platform. You're saying that you are a reasonable person, you have a reasonable argument, and therefore I, as a reasonable person, will debate this with you. Don't do that. Because truth does not need a defense. It's as simple as that. The next question is, of course, what caused the Holocaust? In the late 1920s and early 1930s, there was the crash of the stock market, there was widespread unemployment, there was tremendous devaluation of money in Europe, and things were really grim. In the United States, we had a president who had a very simple answer: hard work. And so we built roads, airports, schools, and fire stations. In Germany, you had a different leader. You had Adolf Hitler. And his solution was very simple. What we want is racial purity and expansion. Expand the country throughout the world. Because the subhumans cause all of our problems. And the simple solution is kill them. It is necessary and right. And so they arrested Jews, Catholics, Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, blacks, communists, gays, handicapped people, locked them into camps and murdered them. What many people in this country are looking for is tolerance. Tolerance means to put up with something. We don't want tolerance. What we want is acceptance. Accept people regardless of color, race, ancestry, national origin, religion, religious practice, disability, sexual orientation, gender, or age. Don't blame them for their genes or ancestors. Don't ever do that. Bullying for any of these reasons is a hate crime. The shortest penalty is 18 months in jail, even if you're under 16. And that's New York State law. Nobody in this room, by looking at these boxes, will say for sure which of them contains gold and which contains garbage. Yet many of you, just by looking at people, seem to know exactly who is good and who is bad. Would you like to be judged for college admission based on your looks? It took us 200 years to get our schools to look like this and our Supreme Court to look like this. We have black, white, Hispanic, We have Christians, Jews, we have men, women. This is how Germany started. And that's when they proclaimed a 1,000-year empire. And a mere 12 years later, this is how it ended. Whenever we speak about the Holocaust, we always say the Germans did this, the Germans did that, the Germans did the others. An amazing feat for a relatively small group of people. So the question is, were all the killings done by the Germans? This is a list of all the countries that Germany had occupied. Every single country, with the exception of Bulgaria, provided collaborator killing units. So all the killing was not done by the Germans, but by the various nations where the people lived. The next question is, of course, was the Holocaust a battle of Christians against Jews? That's how it's very often being presented. We know that 6 million Jews died during the Holocaust. But what is truly, unfortunately forgotten is that roughly 6 million Christians and Muslims died too. Altogether, roughly 12 million people died. If I were to ask you to imagine 12 million people, I don't think you could. The number is much too large. We're not used to dealing with numbers of that magnitude. So let's do this. Let's line up 12 million people. One person behind the other, and allow roughly 1 foot 3 inches for each person. So roughly the length of your arm, you would have 2 people, 3 foot 9, 3 people, 5 foot 4 people, and so on. And if you started that line in New York City, that line would stretch from New York across the Midwest Rocky Mountains all the way to California. That's 12 million people. Roughly 6 million died in various concentration camps, and the other 6 million in the killing fields of Ukraine and other countries. How was it possible for so much evil to succeed? It has been said that all that is necessary for evil to succeed is that good people do nothing. In 1933, when Hitler and his party came to power, and they were burning books by American, Jewish, German authors, the good people did nothing. When they arrested people and put them into camps, the good people did nothing. When they banned paintings by Van Gogh and Picasso, the good people did nothing. When they arrested 1,900 Catholic priests and put them into camps and 2,100 Protestant ministers and killed them, the good people did nothing. When they took people of color and put them into camps, the good people did nothing. When they lined up gypsies and shot them, the good people did nothing. When they wiped out entire towns such as Linz in Czechoslovakia and Estomo in Greece, not because these people had done anything wrong, but strictly as a reprisal for the killing of 1 or 2 German officers, the good people did nothing. These doctors and nurses, and they are doctors and nurses, participated in the murder of roughly 250,000 people because, according to the government, their life was unworthy of life. They were eating German food but didn't contribute towards the economy. They were handicapped people, mentally retarded people, babies with birth defects, and the good people did nothing. Here are just some of the people who were persecuted. There were specific authors, painters, Polish noblemen, communists, gypsies, Jews, gay people, members of labor unions, and the good people did nothing. Why didn't most Germans object to it? I mean, it seems sort of obvious. priority over everything. This was the German national anthem. Germany, Germany above everything in the world. Above parents, above family, friends, teachers, even church. So people didn't trust each other anymore. You didn't know who of these people was for the government and who was against. So people stopped writing books, plays, stopped painting. They even stopped telling jokes. What kind of people were the Nazis really? Nazis were cowards who wrote anonymous letters. They sent letters to newspapers, they sent letters to government offices, people were arrested, and people committed suicide. Today we call it cyberbullying. It's exactly the same thing. Saying things about the person that are not true. And today, unfortunately, many people are committing suicide over cyberbullying. Nazis were bullies who belonged to government-organized gangs. They even combed their hair the same way. They were bullies who enjoyed power. So you had 5, 6 people ganging up on one person, having great, great fun, laughing their heads off as they kick a person on the ground, just like these 7 kids right here on Long Island who were involved in the murder of Marcello Lucero. Nazis were bullies who enjoyed senseless destruction. They broke stores and homes and broke works of art. They painted on walls and windows, just like some people still do right now here on Long Island. Nazis knew that bystanders encourage bullying. That's an old truth. So a teacher in a school would write on the blackboard, "The Jews are our biggest enemy," and 2 Jewish kids had to stand before the blackboard and being embarrassed. Or these people here had to scrub the sidewalk where everybody was looking on. Everybody knows that crowds are really favored of bullies. So today you will find that somebody will knock your books down in a crowded hallway and they think it's funny. Nazis prided themselves in finding ways to oppress others. So they had some 2,000 anti-Jewish rules. 2,000 of them. For instance, public was forbidden to buy from Jews. And so they had outside Jewish stores big signs which says, "Germans, defend yourself. Don't shop from Jews." Jews were fired by all hospitals, schools, colleges, and corporations. We can't imagine in this country somebody being fired or losing his job because of his background. Yet it wasn't too long ago, actually not that many years ago, where we had signs like these all over the United States. We had signs like these. We had signs like these. And even signs like these. Jews got a big J stamped on their identification card, and they got a new middle name. If you were a man, it was Israel, and if you were a woman, it was Sarah. And this is the way a Jewish passport looked like, with a big J on it for Jew, and the Sarah is a middle name. Jews had to wear a yellow star, and if you were in Germany, this is the way the star looked. But if your name was Anne Frank, by the way, how many of you have read the diary of Anne Frank? Okay, I'll just make a couple of remarks about it. If your name was Anne Frank and you lived in Holland, this is the way the star looked. And these were the biggest enemies of Germany. Because as long as you have little children, they will grow up and they too will have children. But if you manage to arrest all these little children and then murder them, there will be no more little children. And as a result of that, roughly 1.5 million little children were murdered. Jews lost their citizenship, so they had signs like these outside towns. Caution, Jews in village. They had special benches for Jews. It wasn't too long ago when we had special benches for black people in this country. Special water fountains. Special seats in the movie houses. Swimming pools. Even telephone booths. Jews could not own radios, Jews were thrown out of their homes, and eventually Jews were jailed in camps and in ghettos. And the good people did nothing. Why did Germans suddenly develop hate against the Jews? Germans had lived as Jews for something like 400 years. There was less than 1 person in 100 in Germany who was Jewish. Most Germans had never even seen a Jew, because the Nazis dehumanized the Jews. They showed the Jew as a worm, showed him as a snake, showed him as a caterpillar. And then, if you repeat a lie often, and people will believe it. And then they used a very simple 3-step logic. Jews are vermin, vermin must be exterminated, and therefore Jews must be exterminated. How about cartoons like this? This cartoon is not from Germany. This cartoon is right here from the United States, from a newspaper called White Aryan Resistance. It's being published today out in California. It has cartoons like this, and funny cartoons like this. Hate is very much alive in these United States. Some of you may laugh at some of these cartoons. They are very, very funny, as long as they don't concern you. And when you are concerned, then you become worried. Because it's not a question of just somebody laughing at you, but somebody threatening you with your life. They had a game called Jews Out. It's a board game, played with dice for little kids. The first kid who got rid of 6 Jews won the game. Of course, the Jews tried to leave Germany, but the world was divided into places where the Jews could not live and places where they could not enter. So 32 nations got together to decide who is going to take the Jews. But everybody had some sort of an excuse. Australia said, we don't have a racial problem and don't want to import one. Venezuela said, we don't want to disturb the demographic equilibrium. United States said Jews are political refugees. The Swiss said the lifeboat is full. And when the Canadian representative was asked, how many Jews are you willing to take? They said, none are too many. And as a result of that, the 32 nations, when it came to a vote, only one nation, the Dominican Republic, was the only one willing to accept refugees. In other words, the good people did nothing. And when the Germans realized that the world didn't give a damn about the Jews, they had the night of the broken glass. And in one single night, 7,000 businesses were destroyed. 1,700 houses of worship were either destroyed or vandalized. 30,000 people were arrested, and within a month, 1,000 were murdered. And then the Jews were fined for these riots, $5 billion. And the good people did nothing. Only 3 reactions occurred at that time throughout the world. The United States recalled its ambassador, but retained diplomatic relations. The Australian Aboriginal League tried to complain, and Great Britain allowed children under the age of 17 to enter the country without parents, without any senior supervision. About 9,800 children entered the country. Hardly any of these children ever saw their parents again. And they were children, babies, newborn babies. They were 15, 16-year-old kids. In the United States, 2 congressmen, one from New York and one from Connecticut, introduced a bill to save 20,000 children under the age of 14. But the bill failed because the wife of the U.S. Commissioner of Immigration said 20,000 charming children will all too soon grow up into 20,000 ugly adults. And she was absolutely right, because at one point she must have been a charming child. And she turned into a very ugly adult, and the bill failed. There was resistance in Germany, the White Rose movement. There was Hans Scholl and his sister Sophie Scholl and their friend Christoph Probst. They wrote 6 flyers over a 6-month period of time. They were arrested, sentenced to death, and beheaded, all in one day. In January 1942, the Nazis announced the final solution to the Jewish question. 10 million Jews were sentenced to death, 6 million were executed. And then World War II broke out, and nothing could be done anymore. In 1933, my father was a mechanical and an electrical engineer. He worked in Berlin, Germany. I was at that time 5 years old, and we escaped from Germany to Yugoslavia. That's a picture of my sister and myself in 1933. I used to be adorable. We moved to a beautiful town called Zagreb, but we immediately ran into a serious problem. We had to learn 2 new languages, Croat and Serbian. And my parents never managed it. And here's a little bit of a homework for you. Ask your parents, grandparents, relatives, or neighbors, what did they do for a living in their home country, and how did they start in this country? You will find that many of the licenses that they had were invalid. Many of their skills were not needed in this country. They had language problems. They even had food problems. So go and talk to them. Don't write anything down. You may want to write it down for your children and for yourself. But once you spoke to them, you will see the problems that these refugees had. My father had great difficulty making a living. As I said, we lived in Zagreb. Once in a while we went for vacation into the mountains or down to the Adriatic Ocean. It was very, I had a good childhood. I didn't know about the problems that my parents had. It's a picture of me when I was about 11 years old. And as time went on, Germany occupied more and more countries. There was no place you could flee to. My father died when I was 12, and a couple of months later, Yugoslavia was conquered by Germany, and the part where I lived came under the ruling of Dr. Ante Pavelic. Just to give you an idea the type of a guy he was a fascist of the worst kind. Here's a post of his. He said, "He who does not drink a liter of Serbian blood is not a Croat." God be with the Croats. Let me give you an equivalence. Let's assume for some reason we start a war with Mexico. Don't ask me why or what. And suddenly you have an American president in the White House who speaks to the American nation and he says, fellow Americans, he who does not drink 2 pints of Mexican blood is not a true American. I mean, we can't even imagine anybody doing that or saying that. Yet there you have it. We had to wear a yellow star. It was a letter Želenet, which stands for Židov, Jew. And as you can see, we had to wear a yellow star in the front and also on the back. And if you went out on the street, people would throw garbage at you, they would sometimes spit at you, they would kick you. So the question which you have, which is rather obvious, why did you wear this stupid star? If I would have been there, I would not have worn it. The problem was that you went out on the street and very often soldiers came, they blocked off both ends of the street, put a soldier in every doorway, and then forced you to show your identification card. If you had no identification card, you were arrested. If you had a Jewish identification card and you had no star, you were arrested. And sometimes, even if you had an identification card and a star, you were arrested. They immediately opened a concentration camp called Jasenovac, where they murdered something like 200,000 people, and most of them were murdered by having their throats cut with a knife like this. They had competitions between soldiers who can cut the most throats in one day. In one town in Kragujevac, a couple of German soldiers were killed by the resistance movement, and so the Nazis, in retaliation, went to a local high school. They picked up 200 students, walked them out of town, and shot them right there. There was resistance all over. But anyway, police and Germans were sitting on the sidewalks, and when you walked on the sidewalk, you had to step into a gutter if you wore a star. My mother was afraid that something would happen to me, so she placed me with one family, one couple, and my sister with another couple. The couple that I lived with for 2 years developed films for the resistance movement. And so for 2 years in hiding, I developed pictures, I made, developed films, I did whatever had to be photographically done. I couldn't go out on the street. I couldn't go near the windows because people from the street would see me. I couldn't wear boots or shoes because the people in the apartment below would hear me. One day there was a knock at the door, 6 o'clock in the morning, and half a dozen of these guys walked in. It was the German secret police. They arrested the couple, and they arrested me too. And they took me down to the headquarters and they beat the living daylights out of me. I was 15 at that time. And I didn't know what was going on. I was bleeding, I was crying, I was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and short pants. And then I was locked up in a basement cell where there was no bed or anything, just a concrete floor and a bucket to be used as a toilet. I was there for 3 days, and after 3 days I was shipped to a border town, to a small jail, where I was locked up in a little cell with millions and millions of fleas. And I was itching and scratching, and from there I was moved to Graz, Austria, and I found myself in this building, which still today is the police station in Graz. I was locked up on the 3rd floor with 3 other kids. 2 of them had been arrested for burglary, And the third kid had murdered his mother. And I was the fourth criminal there. I was there for about 6 weeks. And one day I looked into the police station yard and I saw my mother walking around with some other women. And that's the last time I've ever seen her. From there I was shipped to Vienna and I found myself in this magnificent house of worship. Except by the time I came there, it didn't look like this anymore, looked like this. It was destroyed in the night of the broken glass. There was glass all over, there was dirt, there was soot, there was water, torn prayer books. And the next day, I and 100 other people went on a 3-day train ride, and we ended up in Czechoslovakia. We were dragged, as you can see, I've been dragged from one country to another. And eventually I ended up in this place called Tennessee. Look at the thickness of the wall. Okay, look at the height of the wall. Okay, look at the shape of the wall. What it was a 160-year-old fortress. And when planes were invented, obviously fortresses were unsafe because all you do is you fly over it and drop a bomb. So civilians moved in. And when Hitler occupied Czechoslovakia, he said, hey, this is the perfect place for a concentration camp. And that's what he did. So what is a concentration camp? If you have lots of people living very happily together, and then one group thinks that they are better than the others, they can take all the other people and they can concentrate them in one little area. And once they're concentrated, there are lots of things you can do with them. You can do nothing with them. You can put them to work. You can work them to death. You can cut their throats. You can gas them and burn their bodies. And the Nazis did all of these things. There were camps all over Europe and North Africa. This is the way the place looked. It was old and dilapidated. As I said, 160 years old. This is where we slept. And this is where we washed ourselves. Remember, it was an old military installation. And this is how people arrived. Actually, they didn't arrive until I came there. I had to lay railroad tracks. I had many jobs there. I made brooms, I made baskets. I also exterminated vermin from the buildings. We used to tape up the windows and then use cyanide gas and put on gas masks and spread these cyanide pills all around the building, and came back the next day and we swept up the dead rats and mice. I was there for 10 months, had no contact with anybody on the outside. But then one day they brought in a whole bunch of railroad cars just like this, cattle cars. There were no seats in them whatsoever, and they loaded us up 100 people per car and closed the doors and windows. It was smelly, stinky inside. There was no toilet. There was a bucket, one bucket for 100 people. The bucket overflowed after an hour. And so we traveled for 3 days, locked up, lying in our feces and urine. And then they opened the door, and we found ourselves faced by a group of SS men and prisoners. And if you look at the picture carefully, you will see every single one of them has a walking stick. And they were beating us with these sticks over the head, over the shoulders, wherever they could. They separated the men from the women, the old people from the young people, the sick people from the healthy people. And the SS men wore uniforms like this. They had skull and crossbones not only on their caps but also on their lapels. They were SS men who had volunteered to murder people. They were put to test. Hey, go over there and kill that person. And if they could do it without bothering them, then they were accepted for this job. Behind us there was an open gate, and next to us there was electrically charged barbed wire. So we asked, hey, where are we? And they told us Auschwitz II, or Birkenau, which was an extermination camp. It meant nothing to us. We've never heard about it, we didn't know what extermination camp meant, never heard of Auschwitz or Birkenau. Actually, there were 3 camps in our vicinity. There was Auschwitz I, which was strictly for criminals, German criminals. They went to the German penitentiaries and they took German criminals, murderers, thieves. Germany didn't have a death penalty. They didn't have a death penalty, at least for guilty people. They only had a death penalty for innocent people. There was Auschwitz III, which was a factory, and we were in Auschwitz II. And this is the way the camp looked. Everybody arrived at the green spot at the bottom. And probably 80% of the people immediately walked over to the red spots on the left-hand side. Those were the gas chambers and the ovens. And all the property that they brought with them was dropped where the black spot was. The area above the green spot was the man's camp. That's where Anne Frank's boyfriend was and her father. And the area below the green spot, that was the women's camp. That's where Anne Frank and her sister went. And despite the fact that the Allied troops knew what was going on, not one single bomb ever fell on the gas chambers, on the railroad tracks, or on the German barracks, over on the right-hand side. In other words, the good people did nothing. This is the way we looked. We had no hair, we had a triangle and a number. And depending why you were in the camp, that's how the triangle was colored. Political prisoners were red, gay people pink, Jehovah's Witnesses purple, gypsies black, Jews yellow, and thieves and murderers light and dark green. And then we were given also a tattoo on our arms with our number. This is how women prisoners looked. That's how Anne Frank would have looked. And these are typical women guards from the concentration camps. This is a barrack, men's barrack, and it's typical. 6 people used to be on each level, and sometimes the top level would collapse on the middle level, fall on the middle level, and the middle on the lower level, and kill people on the lower level. There was constantly urine and feces dribbling from one level to the other. This is a women's barrack after liberation. Half the people were gone by this time. There is no picture of the inside of the barracks while the camp was in operation. But even here you see how crowded it was. There were only half the people there. This is a picture of the man's barrack after liberation. There are only 3 people there. The man in the middle has the only 2 properties that we had, a bowl and a spoon. The bowl was filled in the morning with some brown water made out of acorns, and we got 2 ounces of bread made out of flour and sawdust. For lunch we got a soup which was salt water into which a few small pieces of unwashed dirty potatoes had been cut, and in the evening we got a similar soup and another piece of bread. We got roughly 400 calories a day, which would be equivalent to 2 pieces of bread and butter. That's it, finished. That's all we got. eating that dirty food gave us tremendous diarrhea, and because we didn't have any vitamins, people lost their teeth. And this is a toilet that we had to use. There was no toilet paper there, and you could spend just a couple of minutes there. This is the bench they used to punish us with if you didn't stand on line properly, or if you had an argument with one of the criminals. You put your feet in the two holes in the bottom, and then you leaned over the bench like this demonstration to General Eisenhower, and one of the criminals beat you with a walking stick. I've seen people dying on this bench. This is a picture of the camp, and 3 times a day we had to stand between the barracks and we counted. And if one person out of 5,000 was missing, we had to stand there in snow, sleet, rain, ice, and wait until the person could be found. There was no way you could escape from the camp. There was electrically charged barbed wire. There were guard towers. There were German shepherds that had been trained to run after prisoners and tear them apart. And if you managed to try to escape, you were immediately caught and brought back with a big sign round your neck which says, "Hooray, hooray, I'm back again." And if you were lucky, the punishment was just being hanged. If not, punishment could be terrible. One man tried to escape, so they took a barrel, hammered nails from the outside of the barrel into the barrel, put the man in the barrel, closed it, and rolled it down a hill. I had to watch once how 2 men were beaten to pulp, and I mean pulp, because they tried to escape. Many people couldn't take the camp, so they just threw themselves against the wire and committed suicide. And once a day, the power was turned off for a brief time, and the bodies were removed. This is one of the 4 crematoria in the camp, and this is one of the gas chambers. People were stripped naked and then jammed into this gas chamber, and through this hole in the ceiling, the Cyclone B gas pellets, these were special gas for people. The pellets were dropped in, and people were killed. And once they were killed, the chambers were aired, and prisoners had to remove any jewelry that the prisoners still wore, and then shove the bodies into one of these ovens. And all that remained of the people were boxes full of wedding rings, piles of glasses, shoes, clothing, and empty suitcases. This is what we saw. People ask me sometimes, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you in the camp? The worst thing that happened to me in the camp was that I was 16 years old, and I didn't know from one day to the next whether I'm going to be alive. The air was constantly filled with the smell of burning hair and burning flesh. There were little pieces of soot flying around, and we could see people being lined up for the gas chambers and screaming and crying. There was nothing we could do. One day Dr. Mengele came into the camp. He was a German doctor who experimented on prisoners. He experimented on roughly 3,000 prisoners, and exactly 100 survived. That's it. He was always immaculately dressed, and he had a big belt buckle which said, "God with us." And Dr. Mengele also had a nickname. His nickname was the Angel of Death, because he selected people for the gas chambers. It was one of his hobbies. And so he came in the camp with a group of his S-men, and they were standing together and telling jokes, and they were laughing and they were having a wonderful time. And all the young people, and I was one of them, had to strip naked, and we were running past Dr. Mengele for our lives. We tried to look taller and stronger. We were smiling. Anything we could do just to look better. Try to look straighter. And we were scrawny kids. And so occasionally Dr. Mengele nodded his head and a person went to the other side. And when we were finished with it, there were 300 of us. We had to run past him again. There were 200, and then run a third time, there were 89. And the 89 of us, we were transferred to a camp where the camp gallows were in the backyard. Within the next 5 days, the other 4,900 prisoners in the camp were sent to the gas chambers. When the war was over 10 months later, of the 89 of us, only 46 were still alive. 46 out of 5,000. I was transferred to Auschwitz I, where all the criminals were, all the murderers, and I worked in the stables there. And in January, which was the coldest winter on record in the 20th century, all the criminals were put into German uniforms and sent to the Russian front. And the rest of us, we were given a little piece of bread and we started on a death march. We walked for a couple of hours and then we stopped. And people who couldn't get up just were shot. There were bodies all over. And we continued. The first night we slept in some stables, and the next day things were even worse because people couldn't walk anymore. They were too weak. They stripped themselves naked and they just fell into the snow and ice and died. On the third day, we arrived at some railroad sidings. 60,000 of us had left the camp, and by this time 15,000 had died. And we were loaded into the open railroad cars, and in the middle of the winter we traveled for 4 days from Poland all the way to Austria. It was unbelievably cold. To tell you the truth, after the first day, I can't remember a thing about that journey. I was absolutely chilled through and through. There was no food there, no water or anything. About half the people died during that trip. And eventually we arrived at a place called Mauthausen, which was a concentration camp from hell. They took prisoners and forced them to carry 100-pound rocks up 186 steps. And when they got to the top, they played a game with them called parachute jumping without a parachute. And they had to push each other off the cliff into the valley. They were stripped naked in the winter and sprayed with water. We limped through this gate and came into this yard, and then we were showered. And we collapsed, screaming with pain, because all of us were frostbitten. Some people died on the spot. My feet started to rot after 3 days, and there was a prisoner of war who was a doctor before the war, and without anesthetic, he cut off my toes of one foot and part of the toes of the other foot, bandaged them up with some paper. That's how he saved my life. But then things got really bad, because we were squeezed between the Russian forces and American forces. There was no food there. We ended up getting a tablespoon of moldy bread a day. I slept next to a dead man for 3 days just to get his ration. And on the 5th of May, we were liberated. And those of us who were alive looked like this. I was 17 at that time, and I weighed 64 pounds. And the vast majority of prisoners looked like this. And then the American forces gave us the only food they had, military rations. And about 20,000 people died. So they went down into the town, they got the local population, and they had to pick up all the bodies and bury them in a mass grave. And after about 3 weeks, I was given a release paper, and I hitchhiked by train back to Yugoslavia. When I came back to Yugoslavia, I found communism had taken over the country, which was just as bad as fascism, only they were killing different people. That's my identification card after 2 years there. And then I managed to get to England. When I came to England, I was 19 years old. I had no skills. I couldn't speak English. And I had to make a living. I didn't even have a schooling. I finished when I was 12 years old. So I started working as a laborer, then as a machine tool fitter, then as a tool and die maker. I got married. I came to the States. And I worked at daytime, and I went to college at night for 10 years. And I got my degree, and I worked as an industrial engineering executive. If you ever see a sign like this, don't ever look at it as a sign of anti-Semitism. It's nothing to do with it. It is a sign of hate. There isn't one single person in this room who is safe under this sign. Simply because of your ancestors, because of your religion, because of the books that you read, because of the friends that you have. In any oppression, there are always four groups of people. They're the victims, the bully, the just, and the bystander. The victims we can divide into the dead, and all we've got left is a bunch of mass graves, monuments, and little plaques on the sidewalk. And the survivors, most of them ended up in displaced person camps and spread throughout the world. Hardly any of them ever went back home. The bully and his gang, well, Hitler, Goering, and Goebbels committed suicide. Hitler killed his girlfriend and his dog. Goebbels killed his wife and 6 children. There were trials, about 200 trials held at the end of the war, but that was it. But what happened to all these thousands and thousands of SS men who were involved in this? 9,000 of them had escaped to South America. 9,000. Amongst them, the angel of death, Dr. Mengele, and here's a picture of him in 1978. In 1979, he accidentally drowned in his swimming pool. Then there were the just people. People like Senpo Sugihara. He was a Japanese diplomat who saved 6,000 people. He died in utter poverty. But when he was asked, why did you do it? He said it was the right thing to do. There was Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish architect. He saved somewhere 100,000 people. He could never be asked because he was imprisoned by the Russians and died somewhere, but he certainly did the right thing. And then there were the people of Le Chambon, a small valley in France, where everybody got involved in it, the whole community, and they saved roughly 5,000 people. They hid people in basements and attics. And when they were asked, why did you do it? They said it was the right thing to do. And then there was a young 29-year-old English stockbroker, Nicholas Winton. He went to Czechoslovakia and he sold lots of children there without parents. So he forged documents. He created the British Committee for Children in Prague, which was a nonsense organization, but he saved 669 children. I'm delighted he did that because he saved this little girl. This little girl has been my wife for the last 60 years, and here she is with Sir Nicholas Winton. He's been knighted by the Queen. He's still alive at the ripe old age of 105. And when he was asked, why did you do it? He said it was the right thing to do. And then there were the righteous amongst the nations, thousands of them, and they all did the right thing. And finally, we have the bystanders. I don't like calling them bystanders. I prefer to call them the good people who do nothing. If you ever find yourself in an oppression, whether it be in school, at home, on the street, and you're a victim, there's nothing much you can do about it. But if you're not a victim, you can join the bully, be one of the just people, or one of the good people who does nothing. To be a just person is very easy. You judge the situation, you understand the problem, you solve it, and you take action. Don't wait for others, because the other people are waiting for you, and you're waiting for the others. And guess what? Nothing is happening. Just people are just people. Not one of them was a Rambo type. Not one of them came on a white horse. 12 million people died. Who's the murderer? Is it the person who pulls the trigger, or the good people who don't stop him? What kind of a person would you be when you know someone is in need? You can be one of the good people who does nothing. You can be like a friend of Annabel Cat. Lots and lots of good friends. Audrey Pott. Lots of good friends. Or these kids, they all had lots and lots of good friends. Best friends forever. Annabel Cat was taking dope. She overdosed. She's dead. Her friends could have stopped it. They could have reported it, but nobody did. So she's dead. Audrey Pott. Somebody took a picture of her in the nude, posted it on the internet. Her friends could have stopped it, but they didn't. She committed suicide. She's dead. And these kids, they were all bullied. Their friends knew it. Their friends could have stopped it, but they didn't. These kids all committed suicide. Don't be one of the good people who does nothing. Ask yourself, what is the right thing to do? You're not little kids. You're not babies. You should know the answer. Then do it. Don't abandon your friends. Speak up. To speak up is not snitching. Don't mix up somebody's life and happiness with copying their homework or doing something silly like that. To speak up means you care. To speak up may save a life. Speak to your teachers, security staff, parents, or guardians. But help someone without being asked. Silence is not an option. At the beginning, I asked a whole lot of questions and I answered them. I'd like to ask you just one single question. By a show of hands, I would like you to answer just this one question. How many of you will promise to help a friend without being asked? Let's see. Thank you. If you keep your promise, you will make it a happier and safer world for your friends. And you will live in that world, because indifference kills. I can tell you from my own experience. Thank you very much.